Hi, it's John Williams here at MIT, and now we're going to look at a data set called BostonCityData, and it's the salary data for all the employees of the city of Boston. So there's about 22,000 employees, so it's quite a big data set. Let's take a look at how we manipulate that data, and eventually we want to plot it. So let me show you what it's going to look like eventually. So here I'm going to bring this up, and if I look at BostonCityData, here, this is what it looks like. Here I'm just plotting out the first 1,000 of those 20,000. I'm going to ask you to filter this data and plot out something different. But as you see, there's some salaries here, 50,000. There's one that's quite high there, 149. Okay, so that's what the data is going to look like. But first we need to be able to pick the data up and manipulate it. So first, let's go and have a look at the data. So it's in a file. You'll have this file called Boston Employee Salaries.json. It's a JSON file, and that's a very specific kind of data file that JavaScript can easily handle. What I've done is I've actually put at the beginning of the file var data equals all this data. So here it is. And it's a massive object, and inside that object is an array. Now part of the first thing we need to do is to discover the structure of this data. So let's load it up. So here's a small program, and the first thing we're going to do is load up that data. So we put a script tag, and source equals the name of that data file. And it's sitting in the same directory as this BostonCityData.html that I'm going to use to load up this file. So here it is. Down here we've got a button, and on click we're going to call run. Call the run function, and here we've got a div where later on we're going to plot the graph, but for now that div just says hello. And we're going to call run, and run is going to create the data set that we're going to eventually plot by calling generate data points. So this is the function, generate data points. Now immediately we have read this file, we'll have as a global variable data, something called data. I put var equals data, remember there. So we've already got data at this point. And I'm actually here, I looked at the data already, and I see that inside the data is something else called data. So that's why that's why I write this length equals. But let's assume that we don't know that. So let me run this file. So here we are, BostonCityData. There it is. And I'm going to put a breakpoint. So here's the file, generate there. I'm going to put a breakpoint there at line 5. So we're going to read in that file, and when I hit the call run function, it's going to call this function generate data points, and it'll stop at line 5. So let's do that. Go back here, and there. Now, if this has been successful, if I've read this JSON file, data should have a value. It does. And look, inside data is a property called data and another one called meta. And this property data is an array of 22,000. And therefore, when I do data.data, I've actually got hold of that array. Let me show you down here in the console, so we can interact with that data.data. Yep, and it's an array 22,000 long. I can even open that array and take a look and see what the structure of it is. So here we see that the line of an array, or rather one element of that array, is itself an array that's 20 long. So each of those entries in the array is something which is an array 20 long. So that's our issue now, is we need to look inside this array to find the data we want. Let me take a look. Data.data. How do I look at one of those, the first element of that array? Well, it happens to be, if I do this, that should do it. There it is. Now I can see what kind of data is in that array. Now actually up here it does the same thing. It shows me what's in one of these. And this is an easy way, instead of counting how far along in this array down in the console, I can just scroll down here. Oops, I shouldn't have pulled that up. Here it is again. And we'll see that the person's name is in 8 and their job is 9. Let's see if we can find the salary. Yep, there's their salary in 11. And yeah, there's another salary. So this is their total salary. 18 is their total after overtime. 11 is their baseline salary. Okay, so just by doing this, we can, so loading the file up and now going into the console, putting a breakpoint, or rather going into the development environment, putting a breakpoint here in our code and going to that line, we can already explore the data. Now I know what to program down below. So here, let's go back to our program now, and so 18 was the salary. Their job, I believe, was in, let's put var job. So this is their job title. Oops, colon. I'm going to do a console.log and I'm going to write out their job. And their job is in line what? Data.data I. So I'm looping over each one of those elements of the array, and now I've got another array and I've got to go into that. And I think it was in 9. I think their name was in 8 and the job title is in 9. So let me write that out to console.log job. Okay? And salary was in 18, the total salary. Let me write that out as well. Console.log salary. And I'm just going to do that for the first few. Here I've got 10. I don't really even need 10. Let me just write it out for the first 2 people. That'll be enough. So, let me run it again. And if I go to my development environment, there it is. And I'm going to get rid of that. So you see I'm looping over 2. And now down in the bottom here in this console, when I run it, we should get exactly supervising claim agent. I got a breakpoint here. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to reload and run the whole thing again. There we go. So down here, I've pulled out 2 of them, supervising claim agent and their salary, and the other one was nurse case manager. Okay, so now we know what their data looks like. Let's figure out if we can plot it. So, let's bring up, I'm going to bring up another file now, BostonCityData 2. And In this, now what we're going to do is we're going to get their salary and we're going to push that into a new data structure. I've got something here called dataset. I call it dataset. It can be any name you like, but it's an array. And I'm going to push into that the data I'm going to need later to plot it. Okay, so I'm going to now insert, let's go back, I'm going to insert some other code that I took out and another piece of code. There, generate data points, and now one more piece. Yes. So the code I've added, I'm going to create a data set. I'm actually going to specify, so instead of doing data set just blank, I'm doing data set and I'm putting in the first row. And it's got two items which happen to be objects. But later on, I'm going to add to this data set. Now, if you want to add to a data set that's been created, remember it's dataset.push, and that'll add on. So I'm going to add on here the salary. Well, first I'm going to add on which number it is. So I'm not going to be personal and put the job title or their name, which I could do, but I'm just going to use I, and I'm going to write their salary. So I'm going to create a table, if you like, or a data set with two columns. The heading of the first column is this, and we're going to use it later for plotting in Google Charts, which you've already seen, and the salary, which is going to be a number. Okay, so I create this data set. Let's just do the first 1,000. Okay, so there it is. And now, so here, generate data points. I've got my data set, and now I'm going to call draw chart data set, and I pass that data set into it. And here's the function draw chart. And we're using Google Charts. So there's a couple of things I needed to add. I need to add this link. Remember, we've got to get the Google Charts API, which is called JS API. So you need that line of code. I also need to tell it to load the core chart package. So that's that. Now this later one we can use if we've got a lot of data like the 22,000, or that I've got, it might take me a little bit of time to load up the Google Charts. Here I'm going to I've got a button, so I give it plenty of time to load the charts. But if I didn't, if it ran immediately, I might need to delay the drawing of the chart until this load has completed. But here I don't need it, a small amount of data, and I'm actually hitting this run button, so I give it plenty of time to load. Now, what I do is I pass in the data set. In here I'm calling it my data, and I've got to change that data set to something that Google Charts can recognize, and that's called a data table. But my data will be in the correct form, which is two columns with, it could be more columns, but two columns with a heading. It needs to have a heading, just like an Excel spreadsheet. And here I'm saying I'm giving some titles for the plot, and I'm giving the vertical axis a minimum value 0 and a maximum value, and it'll actually calculate these. Now I call chart.draw, and I pass in the data table with the options, and it should draw the chart. Let's see if it does. So I'm going to save that, go to 2, here we are. Okay, let's just make sure that I didn't get any errors. No, I haven't got any errors there. Now I can go ahead and call the run function, and there we are. So what I want you to do is to take the first 1,000 and just plot out everyone above 50,000. Okay, so you've got that. Plot out everyone with salaries above 50,000. So don't plot all the data points, just the ones with salaries above 50,000 for the first 1,000 points. Okay, bye.